The sound of shattering ceramic cut through the humid, chaotic air of the kitchen like a gunshot. I didn't flinch. I didn't look up from the cutting board where I was dicing shallots with a rhythm that was more heartbeat than mechanics. Tap, 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 tap. In a professional kitchen, noise is just texture. The violent hiss of scallops hitting a smoking pan, the metallic clang of the dish pit, the low, thrumming drone of the walk-in fridge compressor, it's all just white noise. You tune it out to survive. But the silence that followed the crash? That was the problem. Silence in a kitchen during service means death. "I can't do this," a voice cracked. High, tight, and dangerously close to tears. I wiped my carbon steel knife on a side towel, checked the edge still razor sharp, and set it down parallel to the board's edge. Always parallel. Order is the only defense against entropy. Finally, I turned around. Carmen Allen stood in the center of the pass, the nerve center of the restaurant. Her hands were gripping the stainless steel counter so hard her knuckles were white, the tendons in her forearms straining against the silk of her cuffs. At her feet lay the remains of what looked like $50 worth of imported bone china. She wasn't wearing chef's whites, she was in a tailored charcoal blazer that likely cost more than my first car. But right now, she looked like she was about to unravel at the seams. "Get a broom," I said. My voice was low. I don't shout. Shouting is for amateurs who haven't done the prep work. Station 2. Refire the burrata. You're losing heat. Station 3. You're dragging on the risottos by 40 seconds. Carmen looked at me, her eyes wide, dark, and terrified. She was the owner. I was the new head chef, hired exactly 48 hours ago to save a sinking ship. But she hadn't told the staff just how deep the hole was. I knew because I'd seen the letter from the bank on her desk when I signed my contract. 42 days. That's how long she had before the operating line of credit froze and the locks were changed. And I couldn't just walk away. My previous employer, a corporate hotel chain, had slapped me with a ruthless non-compete clause when I left. The Gilded Fork was the only fine dining establishment outside the 20-mile radius that was hiring. If I lost this job, I was legally barred from working in a kitchen for 6 months. Leo's tuition, my rent, the debt I owed my TO. It all hinged on this woman not having a nervous breakdown in the middle of dinner service. "Marcelo," she breathed, ignoring the line cooks who were scrambling to obey my quiet commands. "The critic from the Chronicle is at table 4. Julian just tweeted that he's opening his new place next door, next month." "We aren't out of plates," I corrected, stepping around the counter. I moved into her personal space, not to intimidate, but to create a physical barrier between her panic and the view of the dining room. I needed to be the wall. "We're out of those plates. The food tastes the same on the white square ones. They don't match the aesthetic," she snapped, but the fire returning to her eyes was better than the fear. "The aesthetic is edible and on time," I said. I pulled a ticket from the rail and slapped it on the marble pass. "You're vibrating, Carmen. Go to the office. Count the cash drawer. Check the reservation log. Do something that doesn't involve handling fragile porcelain." She blinked, stunned by the direct order. Nobody spoke to Carmen Allen like that. Her jaw tightened, a beautiful, stubborn line that I cataloged immediately. "I am trying to save this restaurant, chef." "So am I said. "And right now, you're the hazard. If the staff sees you panic, they panic. If they panic, the risotto burns. If the risotto burns, the critic destroys us. And if the critic destroys us, that bank letter on your desk becomes a foreclosure notice." I didn't wait for her response. I turned back to the line, clapped my hands once sharp, decisive. 2 minutes to window on the lamb. Garnish is mint oil, not basil. Let's go. I felt her linger for 3 seconds. I could smell her perfume, something subtle, like rainwater and expensive vanilla cutting through the smell of garlic and searing meat. Then, the sharp click-clack of her heels retreated toward the back office. The air in the kitchen instantly decompressed. Hook Strategy C. Social friction. The kitchen wasn't just a workplace, it was a bomb site, and I was the only one who knew which wire to cut. The shift ended at 11 p.m. The cleanup took another hour. By the time the last dishwasher had sprayed down the mats and clocked out, the kitchen was silent, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of bleach and lemon degreaser hung in the air. The scent of a battle survived. I packed my knife roll slowly. Wusthof Schon Global. My tools. I oiled the blades before zipping the leather case. I found Carmen in the office. It was a small, cramped room stacked high with boxes of wine and file folders. The chaotic archive of the restaurant's history. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by invoices, her blazer draped over a chair. She looked smaller than she had in the kitchen. Julian poached the sous chef, she said without looking up. He sent a text 10 minutes ago. Offered him $5 more an hour and a signing bonus. I leaned against the doorframe, checking my watch. 12:15 a.m. Tio Pablo would be asleep on my couch, and Leo would be dreaming of dinosaurs. I needed to go. Julian is scared, I said. He's winning. She countered, finally looking at me. Her mascara was smudged under one eye. He left this place in debt, took the best recipes, and now he's stealing the staff. I can't match that pay, Marcelo. I can barely pay you. I didn't ask for a raise. I walked over, picked up a stack of invoices that were dangerously close to toppling over, and squared them off on the desk. I asked for control of the kitchen. You gave it to me. Control doesn't pay the supplier for the Wagyu, she muttered, rubbing her temples. I watched her hand. She pressed 3 fingers against her left temple, closing her eyes. It was a tell. A micro-observation I'd filed away on day 1. Left temple means headache. Right temple means anger. This was pain. I negotiated a new deal with the fishmonger this morning, I said quietly. Her eyes snapped open. How? Sal hates us. He hates me. He says we take too long to pay. He threatened to cut us off yesterday. I went down to the docks at 5 a.m., I said. His delivery truck was stalled in the loading bay. Bad alternator belt. He was screaming at his driver, losing money by the minute because the ice was melting. Carmen stared at me. And? I used to be a mechanic before culinary school. I lied. It wasn't a total lie. I'd fixed cars in my uncle's shop to pay for diapers when Leo was a baby. I had a spare belt in my truck. I swapped it out. Took me 15 minutes. Grease for grease. She looked at the paperwork I placed on her desk. Net. 3. 0 payment terms. She read, her voice shaking slightly. Instead of cash on delivery. That frees up $4,000 this week. Enough for the Wagyu, I said. And the payroll. She looked up at me. The fluorescent light of the office buzzed overhead. For a moment, the barrier of bosses and employee thinned. She looked at me not as a subordinate, but as a lifeline. You fixed his truck, she repeated, as if trying to process the logic. To get better terms on halibut. Competence is currency, I said. I adjusted my knife roll on my shoulder. I have to go. My daughter wakes up at 6. Wait. Carmen stood up fully. She looked exhausted, terrifyingly fragile, and beautiful, in a way that made my chest ache, a feeling I ignored by focusing on the invoices. Marcelo. Boss? Thank you. Don't thank me, I said, turning to the door. Just don't drop any more plates. We need those for the winter menu. The next 2 weeks were a war of attrition. The Gilded Fork was a beautiful restaurant, high ceilings, exposed brick, velvet banquets, but underneath, it was rotting. Not literally, but structurally. The systems were broken. Julian, the previous chef and Carmen's ex-business partner, had run it on ego and adrenaline. I ran it on spreadsheets, prep lists, and discipline. I implemented the blue tape rule. Everything had to be labeled. Date, contents, initials, everything had a place. If it wasn't labeled, it went in the trash. Carmen hated it. She felt like I was erasing the soul of the place. You threw away the truffle oil, she accused me on Tuesday, storming into the walk-in cooler while I was doing inventory. The cooler fan was blasting, the air biting cold at 38 degrees. It was oxidized, I said, not looking up from my clipboard. I was counting quarts of heavy cream, and it wasn't real truffle. It was synthetic. 2,4-dithiapentane. We don't serve fake food. It costs $40 a bottle. Her breath puffed in white clouds. She was hugging herself, shivering in her silk blouse. It costs your reputation if a customer tastes gasoline in their risotto. I turned to face her. The walk-in was tight. We were standing 2 feet apart, surrounded by shelves of produce. You hired me to fix the food. Let me fix the food. I hired you to keep the doors open, she argued, her teeth chattering slightly. I need to approve menu changes. Julian always ran the specials by me. I am not Julian, I said. The name hung in the cold air. I stepped to the side, blocking the direct draft from the fan with my body. It was an instinct, CS 32. Protect the perimeter. I didn't offer her my coat. That would be too intimate, too cliché. Instead, I used my body as a shield against the cold. My contract says I have autonomy over the menu as long as food cost stays under 30%, I said calmly. Currently, I'm at 28. I saved you 12% in week 1 by cutting waste. That's your mortgage payment, Carmen. She stared at me, her chin tilted up. She was used to men who screamed, or men who caved. She didn't know what to do with a man who simply said no and showed her the math. Fine, she said, her voice brittle. But if the reviews drop, you're fired. If the reviews drop, I said, meeting her gaze, I'll quit. She turned and marched out, pushing the heavy insulated door open. I watched it swing shut, the seal engaging with a heavy thud. My hands were shaking slightly, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline. I needed this job, but I couldn't save her if she kept grabbing the steering wheel. The breakthrough happened on a Thursday. Rain was hammering against the skylights, a relentless coastal storm that made the dining room feel cozy, but the kitchen humid and sticky. The humidity messed with the bread dough. I had to adjust the hydration levels on the fly. I was prepping the line, sharpening my knife, when Tio Pablo called. Marcelo, he said, and the tone of his voice made me stop sharpening mid-stroke. The school called. Leo has a fever. 102. She threw up. They need someone to pick her up. I can't leave the shop. The lift is stuck with a customer's car on it. I'm on my way, I said instantly. I hung up and ripped off my apron. The dining room was fully booked. We were down a sous chef. Leaving now was professional suicide. I walked into the office. Carmen was on the phone, her voice smooth and charming, soothing a vendor who was late with the linens. She saw my face, the pale tightness of it, and hung up on the vendor without saying goodbye. What's wrong? She asked, standing up. I have to go. Leo is sick. High fever. Now? She looked at the clock. Service starts in 20 minutes. We have 80 covers. The mayor is coming in at 7:30. I know. I grabbed my bag. I'll try to get back once I get her settled with my Tio, but go, she said. I paused. I expected an argument. I expected guilt. I expected her to remind me about the contract. She stood up and walked around the desk. She looked at the kitchen, then at me. I can expedite. I used to run the pass before Julian took over. I know the menu. You haven't worked the line in 3 years, Carmen. I know how to read a ticket, chef. She gave me a look that was pure steel. Family first. That's the rule, right? Go get your daughter. I nodded, my throat tight. Thank you. I ran out the back door into the rain. I didn't make it back that night. Leo's fever spiked to 103. I spent the night in the dim light of her bedroom, cooling her forehead with damp washcloths, giving her sips of Pedialyte, and watching Bluey on repeat. Every time my phone buzzed, I gripped it, expecting a text from Carmen saying the kitchen had collapsed, saying the mayor walked out, saying I was fired. The text never came. When I came in the next morning at 6 a.m. to execute the prep I'd missed, the kitchen was already unlocked. The smell hit me first, rich, dark beef stock reducing. Carmen was there. She was wearing a stained apron over yesterday's silk blouse. Her hair was in a messy bun, strands escaping to frame her face. She was asleep at the stainless steel prep table, her head resting on a folded towel, a half-peeled carrot near her hand. The kitchen was spotless. The prep list for the morning, which I usually did alone, was done. Vegetables diced, stocks simmering, sauces labeled in blue tape with her elegant, looping handwriting. I walked over quietly. The floor squeaked under my non-slip shoes. She stirred, blinking open, bleary eyes. She looked wrecked. Dark circles, pale skin. Did we survive? I asked softly. She sat up, rubbing her face, leaving a smudge of flour on her cheek. She smiled, and it was tired, but genuine. We did 82 covers. No sendbacks. The mayor ordered the lamb. He liked the mint oil. Then she winced as she moved her hand. What happened? I asked. Nothing. The salamander. It bites. She held up her left hand. A nasty, angry red burn ran across her knuckles where she'd reached too close to the broiler element. I didn't say anything. I put my bag down. I walked to the first aid kit on the wall. One of the first things I'd reorganized, grabbed the burn gel, nonstick gauze, and medical tape. I pulled a stool over. "Give me your hand," I said. She hesitated, then extended her hand. It was trembling slightly. I applied the gel gently. My fingers were rough, scarred from a decade of burns and cuts. Hers were soft, manicured, but now, marked by the trade. I wrapped the gauze with precision, securing it with tape, careful not to pull too tight. "You have good knife skills," I said, nodding at the cambros of diced carrots behind her. "Uniform cuts, quarter-inch brunoise. I learned from the best," she murmured, looking at the bandage. "My father taught me. Before he died. Before Julian told me I belonged in the office." "Julian was wrong," I said. I smoothed the tape down. "You handled the line better than half the guys I went to culinary school with." I finished the bandage. I didn't let go of her hand immediately. I checked the circulation. It was a professional touch, strictly medical, but the air between us felt heavy. "How is Leo?" she asked, her voice soft. "Better. Fever broke at 3 a.m. My TO is with her now." I couldn't leave the stock. "It needs skimming every hour or it gets cloudy." "Go home," I said. "Sleep. I've got the kitchen." She slid off the stool, her legs unsteady. "I have a meeting with the bank at 2. I need to explain the cash flow projection." "Cancel it. You look like a raccoon." She laughed, a wet, choked sound. "You're fired. Go home, boss." She went. And for the first time in 2 weeks, she didn't check the line before she left. She trusted me. Beat 6. The midpoint twist. We were finding a rhythm. The reviews were inching up. "The Gilded Fork is back," one food blogger wrote. Focused, sharp, and delicious. The dining room was buzzing again. Then the letter came. It wasn't a bank notice. It was a notice from the city safety inspector. An anonymous tip had reported a critical structural hazard in our ventilation system. "It's Julian," Carmen said, pacing the office, the letter crumpling in her fist. "It has to be. He knows the ductwork is old. He knows we can't afford a retrofit." "They're shutting us down?" I asked, reading the notice over her shoulder. "Immediate inspection tomorrow at noon. If we fail, they pull the permit. We close for repairs." She turned to me, panic rising in her chest. "If we close, the investors pull the plug. We're done. The 42 days are up next week. Let me see the ducks," I said. We went up to the roof. The coastal wind was whipping around us, gray and cold. I popped the access panel to the main exhaust fan unit. It was bad. The grease buildup was heavy, years of neglect. But that wasn't the issue. Someone had loosened the bolts on the fan mount. It was rattling, vibrating enough to cause a noise complaint, or worse, a fire. "He loosened it," I said, touching the shiny, exposed threads where the nut should have been tight. "This didn't happen over time. This is sabotage." Carmen put her hands over her mouth. "We're finished." "No," I said. I stood up, wiping grease on my pants. "We're not." I pulled my phone out. I wasn't a chef right now. I was a fixer. I need a 7/16 wrench, a tube of Loctite Red, and 5 gallons of industrial degreaser, and a wire brush. "Marcelo, you're a chef, not an HVAC technician. If you break it." "Today, I'm both." I looked at her. "Hold the flashlight." We spent 6 hours on that roof. It was grueling, filthy work. The wind howled. I was covered in black grease from elbow to fingertips. Carmen, in her designer coat, held the heavy flashlight, handing me tools as I called for them. 7/16, I'd say. She'd hand me the wrench, slapping it into my palm like a surgical nurse. "Rag." She'd hand me a rag. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about the bolt, the fan, the leverage. We communicated in grunts and nods and shared exertion. By midnight, the fan was secured. The vibration was gone. The ducts weren't glistening new, but I had scraped them down to the bare metal in the critical zones. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't factory fresh, but it was clean enough to pass a swab test. It was safe. I sat back on the gravel roof, wiping sweat and grease from my forehead with a dirty sleeve. Carmen sat next to me, her coat ruined, a smudge of grease on her nose. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "This isn't in your contract." "It's my kitchen," I said. "My airflow. My fire safety." She looked out at the city skyline, the lights blurring in the mist. "My father opened this place 40 years ago. He told me never to let anyone see me sweat. He said if I showed weakness, the sharks would come. He was wrong, I said. She turned to me. Her eyes were searching my face in the darkness. I'm scared, Marcelo. I'm 38, and I feel like I'm playing dress-up in my father's restaurant. Julian makes me feel small. You're not small, I said. I picked up her sketchbook that she'd brought up to the roof, adjusted the binding so it sat flat, and slid it back to her. You kept the lights on for 3 years, against a guy who wanted to destroy you. That's not dress-up. That's war. And you're still standing. She let out a shaky breath. Why do you stay? You could get a job at a stable restaurant tomorrow. One where the owner doesn't drag you onto the roof at midnight. I don't like stable, I lied. Then, I gave her the truth. I like building things. And Leo likes the cookies you send home. She says they taste like magic. She smiled, soft and sad. Our shoulders nearly touched, and neither of us stepped back even when the wind shoved against us. Do you want to stay tonight? She whispered. The question hung in the air. It was loaded. Dangerous. I looked at her. I saw the exhaustion, the hope, and yes, the loneliness that mirrored my own. But as her employee, I couldn't cross that line. Before I could answer, she shook her head quickly. Forget I said that. I'm tired. I'm barely lucid. If that crossed a line, say so. You can walk away. She gave me an out. She was protecting me from herself. Overtime is double pay, boss, I joked, keeping my voice light, diffusing the tension into something safe. She laughed, breaking the spell. Get out of here, Cruz. Just waiting for you to get down the ladder safely, I said. I waited until she was in her car before I drove away. I watched her taillights fade, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. But I went home. I checked on Leo. I left the porch light on, just in case. Beat 8. The climax. The inspection was brutal. The inspector, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he ate joy for breakfast, crawled through every inch of the kitchen. He checked temperatures with a laser thermometer. He ran a white glove under the prep tables. He spent 20 minutes on the roof. Carmen and I stood in the kitchen, waiting. The staff was silent. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Carmen was vibrating again. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Breathe, I said. Henderson came down. He dusted off his hands. He looked unhappy. The fan mount is new, he noted. Refurbished, I said. Maintenance log is up to date. He looked at me, then at Carmen. The grease trap logs? This was the trap. Grease trap logs are the first thing people fake. I walked to the office and brought out the binder. I handed it to him. Every entry was dated, signed, and time-stamped. I had reconstructed the logs from the previous years using invoices from the pumping service, organizing them into a binder that was undeniable. I had spent 3 nights doing this forensic accounting applied to sludge while Carmen thought I was just reorganizing the basement. Impressive, Henderson grunted, flipping through the pages. Most places don't keep records this clean. He signed the permit. Pass, but keep an eye on that fan belt. It's tight. Carmen let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, she said, her voice steady now. As soon as he left, the kitchen exploded. The staff cheered. Carmen looked at me, beaming. She stepped forward, and for a second, I thought she was going to hug me. Then the phone rang. It was Julian. Carmen answered on speaker. Her hand was shaking. So, his oily voice filled the office. I heard you passed. Henderson must be going soft in his old age. What do you want, Julian? Carmen asked. I want to make you an offer. I know you're broke, Carmen. I know the 42 days are up on Monday. Sell me the lease. I'll give you a clean exit. I'll pay off the debts. Or, I'll tell the Chronicle about the little incident with the health department 5 years ago. The one your dad paid to cover up. The rodent issue. Carmen went pale. She slumped against the desk. This was the checkmate. He knew everything. We have to call the police, I whispered. Carmen shook her head, terror in her eyes. We can't. If that rumor hits the press before an investigation clears us, the investors will freeze the funding instantly. We'll be bankrupt before the truth comes out. He knows that. He wins either way. It was a perfect trap. If we fought, we starved. If we surrendered, he took the legacy. I stepped closer to the phone. I put my hand over hers, steadying it. Then I leaned down. This is Chef Cruz, I said. Ah, the handyman, Julian laughed. The hired help. We aren't selling, I said calmly. And if you mention the health department, I'll mention the invoices I found in the basement archives. Silence. What invoices? Julian's voice lost its smirk. The ones from Vintage Construction LLC, I said, reading from a paper I'd pulled from my pocket. The company you own. You billed the restaurant $60,000 for renovations that never happened in 2019. I found the box labeled MISC when I was looking for the grease trap records. I have the receipts, I have the dates, and I have a cousin who is a notary and is very bored. You dug through the archives? I like to be organized, I said. We'll be requesting a forensic audit from the restaurant board on Monday morning. Unless you stop calling, and unless you stop poaching my staff. You wouldn't. Try me. The board loves a good lawsuit. I hung up the phone. The click was final. My heart was beating fast, but my hands were steady. Carmen stared at me. She looked stunned. You have the receipts? You found them? I found them in the archive boxes you told me to organize on my first day, I said. I was saving them for a rainy day. Today looked like rain. She didn't hug me. She walked around the desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a bottle of expensive bourbon. She poured 2 shots into coffee mugs. To the handyman, she said, raising her mug, her eyes shining with fierce pride. To the boss, I replied. We clinked mugs. Beat 9. Falling action. The Chronicle review came out on Sunday. It wasn't just good. It was glowing. The gilded fork has found its soul again, it read. The food is grounded, technically perfect, and full of heart. But more importantly, the room feels settled. It feels like home. We were fully booked for 3 months out. The money problems weren't gone, but they were manageable. I got my raise, Leo got her braces, Tio Pablo got his loan repaid. But things between me and Carmen were strange. We were partners in war, but the war was over. Now we just had to be people. And being people is harder than fighting a villain. I was closing up one Tuesday night. The staff had gone. Carmen had stayed late to work on the new fall menu design. I walked into the dining room. It was dark, lit only by the street lamps outside and the candle on her table. She was sitting at table 4, the best table, sketching on a pad. You should go home to Leo, she said, not looking up. She's with Tio Pablo tonight. Movie marathon. Jurassic Park. I stood by the table. I fixed the espresso machine. The gasket was cracked. It won't leak tomorrow. Of course you did. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked sad. You fix everything, Marcelo. Not everything. She put the pen down. Julian sent a formal settlement offer today. He offered to buy me out for double the valuation. It would be enough to retire. Enough to never worry about a fan belt again. My fingers tightened on the chair back. The wood creaked under my grip, and for a second, the room felt smaller. And I told him to go to hell, she said softly. I told him I have a chef who needs a kitchen. She looked at me, really looked at me. I don't know what I would have done without you. You saved my life. Or, at least, my life's work. You saved yourself, I said. I just handed you the wrench. Why are you still standing there? She asked softly. Because I don't want to leave. The confession hung there. Simple. Terrifying. She stood up. She was wearing heels, so she was almost my height. She smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture. I'm your boss, Marcelo. And I'm 10 years older than you, and you have a kid. And I don't know how to do family. I just know how to work. I know the math, I said. I'm good at math. Do you want to hear my numbers? Tell me. I'm 29. You're 38. That's 9 years. In 20 years, I'll be 49, and you'll be 58. Still sharp. Still fearless. She laughed, a wet, choked sound. And, I continued, taking a step closer, breaking the invisible barrier I'd built for 8 weeks. Leo drew a picture of you yesterday. She put a crown on your head. She did? Yeah. She thinks you're the queen of the forks. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be soft. I've had to be hard for so long. You don't have to be soft, I said. I reached out and adjusted the table leg so it stopped wobbling, a nervous habit of mine. You've been holding this place up alone for years. You're not fragile. You're structural. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a practical one. It was the ultimate act of service. This is the spare key to the back gate, I said. I made a copy because the old one was sticking and I didn't want you struggling with it in the rain. I wanted you to have one that works smoothly. I placed it in her hand. Metal on skin. She looked at the key. Then she looked at me. Are you working late again? She whispered, echoing the question she'd asked a dozen times before when she found me fixing things. No, I said. I'm just waiting for you. Beat 10. Resolution. 3 weeks later. The industry night gala. Everyone was there. Julian. Looking defeated. The critics. The investors. The mayor. Carmen walked in. She was wearing emerald green silk, the kind that caught the light when she moved, making her look like she owned the room because she did. I was in my chef's whites, fresh from the kitchen, standing by the tasting station we'd set up. I felt out of place in the sea of tuxedos, but I stood tall. A delivery boy wove through the crowd and tapped me on the shoulder. Chef Cruz? Yeah? Delivery from Sal at the docks. He said, grease for grease. I looked down. It was a styrofoam cooler. Inside was a massive, pristine loin of bluefin toro. The good stuff. The stuff you can't buy unless you know a guy. Carmen appeared at my elbow. Is that? Sal sends his regards, I said, smiling. Julian approached her then, a sneer ready, trying to reclaim some power. Carmen, flying solo as always? She looked at him, then looked at me across the room. I nodded. One sharp, affirmative nod. I got you. She turned back to Julian. Actually, no. She walked over to me. The room went quiet. The hierarchy was clear. Owner and staff. But she didn't stop at the respectful distance. She stepped right next to me, shoulder to shoulder. This is Marcelo Cruz, she said to the room, her voice ringing clear. My head chef. She didn't specify business or personal. She didn't have to. She reached out and brushed a piece of lint off my shoulder. A proprietary, intimate gesture that claimed me in front of all of them. Julian looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Later that night, we sat on the tailgate of my truck in the empty parking lot, eating leftover canapes under the stars. The gala was over. The masks were off. You called me partner, I said. I filed the paperwork today, she said, handing me a napkin. Carmen, that's a huge risk. It's not a risk. It's an investment. She leaned her head on my shoulder, exhaling a long, steady breath. I can't lose my fixer. You're not going to lose me. Good. She sighed, the sound of a woman finally putting down a heavy load she'd carried for a decade. Because I really don't want to fix the fan belt myself. I laughed, wrapping my arm around her. She fit perfectly against my side. From inside the restaurant, I could hear the faint sound of the dishwasher running a low hum, and then the distinct clink of a plate being stacked. It didn't sound like panic anymore. It sounded like music. I got it, I said. I got you.